Hey guys, imagine waking up soaked in cold mud, your boots filled with rotting water, your breakfast a cigarette and canned meat that tastes like betrayal, and your neighbors? Rats the size of cats, lice that party harder than you ever did, and the constant thunder of distant death. Welcome to the trenches. You've officially time traveled to World War I, and spoiler alert, you're not going to make it out in one piece. Before you get comfortable, please hit like and subscribe, but only if you truly enjoy what I do. Drop a comment telling me where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. It's always fascinating to see who's joining us from around the world. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's dive together into today's journey. Congratulations, you've been conscripted. You're now Private Nobody of the British Army, 1916 edition. Your pay is atrocious, your gear is itchy, and the odds of survival? Let's just say Las Vegas wouldn't take that bet. You've been sent to the Western Front, a delightful stretch of muddy, corpse-strewn real estate that's basically Europe's worst Airbnb. Your home? A trench, roughly 6 feet deep, filled with freezing water, human waste, decaying bodies, and the shattered remains of your last shred of optimism. Let's take a moment to appreciate the architecture. The trench is a marvel of military engineering, dug by hand, reinforced with wooden planks, if you're lucky, and lined with sandbags that serve as both protection and false hope. The walls cave in regularly, the floor becomes a soup of sludge after every rain, and the roof is the sky, gray, eternally drizzling and occasionally vomiting shrapnel. Your schedule? A rotating cycle of standing guard, called sentry duty, carrying supplies through shell-cratered mazes, pretending to eat, pretending to sleep, and trying not to cry. The highlight of your day might be mail, if it makes it to you, and the chance to write a letter home that begins with "I'm fine," which is the most blatant lie you'll ever tell. Let's talk about food. Breakfast is usually a cup of tea that's more mud than leaf, and a hunk of hardtack that could double as a weapon. You're issued rations of bully beef, canned meat so dense and salty it might have been mined from the core of a prehistoric ox. Bread, moldy, jam, occasionally made of actual fruit, but more often of flavorless goo. If you're truly cursed, someone will pass you a tin of makanoki, a stew-like substance that smells like old socks and tastes like punishment. You think that's bad? Wait until nature calls. There are latrines, technically, long, shallow pits called fire trenches. They're supposed to be dug outside the main trench, but when shellfire rains down like the apocalypse, you're not going out there. So, you improvise. Tin cans, buckets, or just squatting in a corner with the grim knowledge that privacy died long before the war began. And speaking of things that die, hygiene. You bathe once a month, if that. Lice infest every seam of your uniform. They bite, they itch, and they lay eggs with industrial efficiency. Soldiers call them chats, and you'll spend your downtime chatting, i.e. picking them off one by one and crushing them between your fingernails like grotesque bubble wrap. Then there are the fleas, the flies, and, oh yes, the trench rats. Rats in the trenches are not your ordinary household vermin. They're the size of rabbits, and they've grown fat feeding on corpses. They crawl over sleeping soldiers, chew on the fallen, and breed like it's a competitive sport. You'll see them everywhere, running along trench edges, sitting beside your bedroll like judgmental roommates, even gnawing on rations with a look that says, "You gonna finish that?" Nighttime brings a new horror. No, not silence. You'll never hear silence again. Night is when the bombardment begins. Artillery shells scream through the sky like banshees. You lie curled in your dugout, hands over your ears, heart hammering like it's trying to escape. The ground shakes, dirt rains from above, and the thunder rolls endlessly. If you're lucky, you'll just wet yourself and survive. If you're unlucky, the trench collapses on top of you, and you suffocate before anyone finds your body. You might be thinking, well, at least I'm not getting shot at constantly, right? Oh, sweet summer child, welcome to Sniper O'Clock. The moment your head rises above the parapet, you're fair game. One quick glint of your helmet, and you're just another statistic, another helmet full of brain matter. Soldiers develop the uncanny ability to move crouched at all times, like goblins skulking in a nightmare. And then there's trench foot. When your feet are soaked 24/7 in cold, dirty water, the skin starts to rot. First comes the numbness, then the swelling, then the flesh turns gray and peels away like old wallpaper. Your toes blacken, and if you're very unlucky, or just unlucky enough, they amputate. The only cure? Dry socks. You have one extra pair. Good luck keeping them clean. Still alive? Good, because now it's time for going over the top. Military slang for crawling out of the trench and charging directly into no man's land. No man's land is the hell between trenches, a muddy wasteland filled with barbed wire, craters, abandoned weapons, and the corpses of friends and strangers. The moment you're up and running, machine guns start chattering. If you make it more than 30 feet, you're considered making good progress. And guess what? That barbed wire? It's not just an obstacle, it's a death trap. Soldiers get tangled in it under fire, screaming, bleeding out, begging for help while bullets stitch the air around them. If you're wounded, your best hope is a stretcher party. Usually 2 exhausted medics hauling you back under gunfire while you bleed into the dirt and think about home. Back in the trench, if you made it, you might get a medal for bravery. Or you might just get back to peeling lice off your shirt and sipping muddy tea like nothing happened. Because in the trenches, the absurdity is the norm. Death is so common it's barely shocking anymore. A soldier might vanish mid-sentence, sniper round to the head, and you just keep talking. Because what else can you do? The worst part? There's no clear end in sight. Weeks drag into months, seasons change, and the trench remains your prison. You see friends go mad. Some talk to ghosts. Some break down crying, others just stop. They stare blankly, eyes empty, hands trembling. Shell shock, they call it. Today we call it PTSD. Back then they called you a coward and sent you back anyway. You write home, but what can you say? Dear Mom, today I watched Jenkins vomit blood after eating spoiled beef. The rat stole my socks. We buried another dozen lads. I dream of clean sheets, the smell of bread, and a world that isn't gray and shaking. But instead, you write, all's well. I miss you. The lads are in good spirits. Because what else can you say? As if all of this isn't enough, disease runs rampant. Dysentery, typhus, and influenza stalk the trenches like reapers with clipboards. The medics do their best, but supplies are low and infection is high. The trench itself becomes a festering wound across the land, oozing death, sorrow, and the stench of despair. And yet, despite everything, soldiers joke, they sing, they carve poems into the trench walls, they make up games. 1 minute you're hiding from death, the next you're laughing with someone over a filthy joke about a French prostitute and a German sausage. Because if you don't laugh, you'll lose your mind, and probably still will. So you think you could have handled a single day in the trenches of World War I? With all due respect, no, you wouldn't last the morning. Still here? Impressive. But don't get too cocky, because now things are about to get even worse. You've survived your first miserable day in the trenches, but day 2 introduces you to a brand new friend, chemical warfare. And no, there's no gas mask tutorial or warning siren, just the sudden smell of garlic and death wafting through the fog. You wake up gasping, your throat on fire, your eyes watering like you've chopped onions while being punched in the lungs. Welcome to your first chlorine gas attack. It starts with a hiss. Then a low, rolling cloud of greenish-yellow death creeps over the parapet and slinks into the trench like it owns the place. And in a way, it does. If you don't get your mask on in time, or if, like many soldiers in 1915, you don't even have one, you're screwed. The gas burns your respiratory tract from the inside out. You feel like you're drowning in battery acid. Some men claw at their throats until their fingernails come off. Others fall and convulse, foaming at the mouth. The lucky ones die quickly. You're handed a smoke helmet, basically a cloth bag soaked in urine that you're supposed to tie over your head like a medieval beekeeper with poor judgment. Why urine? Because it was believed the ammonia helped neutralize the gas. Is it effective? Not really. But it smells so bad, you're distracted from the chemical burns, so. Bonus? Later you'll encounter mustard gas. Unlike chlorine, it's heavier, it sticks to your skin and clothing, and it's just patient enough to let you think you're fine. Until your skin blisters, your lungs tighten, and your eyes swell shut hours later. You'll never fear the color yellow the same way again. And even when the gas isn't killing you, it's always looming. The mere threat of it is psychological torture. You sleep with your mask under your chin. You practice drills at midnight. You hear phantom hissing even when there's nothing there. Every misty morning becomes a roulette wheel. Is it fog or is it death? You'll find out in a few horrifying minutes. But let's not forget your old pal shell shock, what we now call PTSD. Back then, it was seen as weakness, cowardice, or moral failure. Picture this: you've spent months in a trench, dodging snipers, sleeping next to corpses, living ankle-deep in freezing filth. One day, your brain says, "You know what? No thanks," and flips the emergency switch. You freeze up, you stutter, you tremble violently, you scream at nothing, you wet yourself uncontrollably. Maybe you're stuck rocking in the corner, whispering names of friends long dead. And how does the army respond? With shame, with punishment, with executions in some cases. Men were literally shot for breaking under pressure. That's right, traumatized, broken, and then sentenced for desertion because you couldn't handle living in a waking nightmare. And even if you somehow keep your wits about you, your ears won't. The constant shelling causes what they politely call trench ear. You'll be partially deaf within weeks. Shell fire is loud enough to rupture eardrums and shake your teeth loose. You can actually feel it in your bones, a low, vibrating hum that seems to buzz through your spine like a tuning fork of doom. The sound never stops. Some men go mad just from the endless percussion of it. In sleep, that quaint luxury from your past life, forget it. You catch minutes at a time, curled under a soggy blanket, helmet pulled low, rifle across your chest like a teddy bear that might save your life. Even when there's no shelling, the snoring, coughing, farting, crying, praying, and occasional screaming of your fellow soldiers makes the trench sound like the worst hostel in hell. Let's talk weather. If it's summer, the stench is so bad your nose considers resigning. The heat cooks the dead where they lie. The flies swarm so thick you inhale them. If it's winter, congratulations. Your trench is now a frozen coffin. Ice forms on the sandbags. Your boots stiffen. Your fingers go numb. Frostbite nibbles at your toes while hypothermia comes for your soul. The cold is inside your bones. It's part of your identity now. You still think maybe you'd have handled it better? Okay, let's try trench raids. These little nightmares usually happen at night. Your commanding officer, who, by the way, is sleeping in a warm, dry dugout behind the lines, orders a raiding party. You and a handful of very unlucky souls climb out under cover of darkness and sneak into enemy trenches. No guns, too loud. You're armed with clubs, knives, knuckle dusters, and grenades. The goal? Kill silently, take prisoners, and gather intelligence. You crawl through no man's land, dodging flares, hoping not to get shredded by wire or caught in a sudden spotlight. If you make it to the enemy trench, you fight in absolute silence. It's intimate, filthy violence. Eyes wide in terror, knives slashing, fists pounding, teeth clenched so hard you crack a molar. You might come back with blood on your face and someone else's jawbone stuck to your boot. Or you don't come back at all. If you do survive, there's no therapy waiting, just a slap on the back and a cold cup of tea. Good work, lad, someone might mutter. Then it's back to your lice-ridden bedroll to dream of blood and screaming. Even your clothes are plotting your demise. Your wool uniform, once a proud symbol of empire, is now a soggy sponge of disease. The seams burst, the boots leak. The putties wrapped around your shins trap mud and moisture, turning your legs into bacteria buffets. Your backpack digs into your spine. Your helmet, oh, your precious Brody helmet, is only marginally useful. It stops shrapnel from above, sure, but does nothing for bullets from the side or for your slowly deteriorating morale. And then there's boredom. Yes, somehow, amidst the death and decay, you're also bored out of your mind. Whole days pass without any action. You clean your rifle obsessively. You write bad poetry. You stare at the wall of the trench and try to count how many shades of brown exist in the mud. You play cards with men who'll be dead by Thursday. You learn to carve chess pieces out of spent shells and rats' bones. Time moves like syrup through sand, but you never relax. The boredom is a cruel joke because it's always interrupted by horror. Just as you start to forget what adrenaline feels like, boom! A shell hits 20 feet away and turns Jenkins into raspberry jam. Or the trench floods and drowns 3 men in their sleep. Or the Germans launch a surprise raid and suddenly you're bayoneting a man in the ribs while he coughs up his last word. And through it all, letters from home arrive. You open one with trembling fingers, hoping for a piece of the world you left behind. Maybe it's from your sister. She's gone dancing. She says she misses you and hopes you're having an adventure. An adventure. You laugh, it's hollow. You want to cry, but there are too many witnesses. The letter smells faintly of soap and safety. You tuck it into your pocket like a talisman against insanity. Then there's the rumors. Oh, the rumors. That the French trenches have wine on tap. That the Americans will end the war in 6 weeks. That the Germans are using flamethrowers now. That your sergeant once punched a tank to death. Anything to distract from the truth. No one knows anything. You're just a cog in a machine grinding men into paste. By now, you've probably aged 10 years in 2 days. Your hands are cracked and bleeding. Your feet are numb. Your stomach is in permanent rebellion. You smell like a combination of rot, despair, and something suspiciously chemical. You've seen things you'll never unsee, heard things you'll never unhear, and worst of all, you've started to get used to it. So you've somehow survived gas, shell shock, lice, trench foot, and the constant orchestral barrage of high-velocity explosives. Congratulations. You're now officially a veteran of misery, but don't pop open the champagne just yet. You're still stuck in the worst theatrical production ever staged, Trench Life, the musical, featuring hit numbers like Why Is That Body Staring at Me? And Oh God, It Moved. Let's talk about death, not the kind you read about in history books with solemn footnotes and casualty stats, but the kind that sleeps beside you, literally. There's a corpse half buried in the trench wall near your station. No one moved it, no one had time. Maybe he was German, maybe he was you last week. His glassy eyes are open, his face slack, and his jaw dislocated into a silent scream. Someone stuck a cigarette in his mouth as a joke. It's been 3 weeks. Nobody's laughing. Dead bodies are part of the furniture now. Sometimes you use them as makeshift sandbags. Other times, the trench wall collapses and uncovers a ribcage or a frozen hand. One poor soul tripped and fell face first into a decomposing officer during a night patrol. He came back vomiting and crying. No one mocked him. They all knew they'd be that guy soon enough. The stench? Indescribable. A putrid perfume of rot, mildew, urine, feces, burning oil, sweat, and something that used to be meat. You stop noticing after a while, not because it goes away, but because your brain gives up trying to protect you. You'd think a breeze might help, but all that does is waft the scent around like nature's sick joke. Let's not forget burials. If you're lucky, and time allows, there might be something approximating a funeral. A shallow grave, a wooden cross. Maybe someone says a few words, usually poor bastard. More often, you're stuffing limbs into shell holes, tossing dirt over a bloodied uniform, or just dragging the body far enough that it stops leaking into your dugout. Religious services. You're more likely to see a priest in your fever dreams, and yet, somehow, you bond with your fellow soldiers. Misery has a way of gluing people together. You laugh with these men, you cry, you confess things you've never told anyone. These trench mates become more than friends. They're your lifeline. You share everything: food, socks, lice, rumors, trauma. If one guy gets mail, everyone gathers around. If someone finds chocolate, it's divided like sacred relics. But then they start dying, one by one. The quiet one who shared your last cigarette, sniped mid-step. The joker who did impressions of the officers, bled out in no man's land. The kid who lied about his age to enlist, crying for his mother as his insides spilled onto your lap. You stop learning names, it's easier that way. And yet, somehow, new faces keep arriving. Reinforcements, fresh, clean, naive. They step into the trench with shiny boots and big smiles, clutching photos of girls they haven't seen since July. You don't bother unpacking their optimism, you just nod, point out the latrine bucket, and tell them to keep their heads down. They'll figure out the rest soon enough. They ask you, is it really that bad? And you smile the smile of a man who's forgotten what daylight looks like and say, it's worse. If you're ever rotated out of the line for a day or two of rest, don't get too excited. Rest means lugging crates of ammo, scrubbing blood from equipment, or building more trenches like the one currently digesting your soul. There's no hot bath, no soft bed, just slightly less awful duties. You might get a change of underwear though. That's cause for celebration and possibly weeping. And then, if you're truly cursed, and at this point of course you are, you're chosen for sentry duty, standing in the mud in the dark for hours, staring across a moonlit hellscape, wondering if that shadow is a bush, a German, or your own slowly unraveling sanity. If you fall asleep, you could doom the whole line. If you panic and shoot too soon, you might hit one of your own. If you wait too long, well, then it's bayonet to the throat time. Oh yes, bayonets. Let's talk about that. Your rifle has a long, triangular blade at the end, not because it's useful, because it wounds in a way that doesn't heal cleanly. Soldiers were told to aim low and twist the blade. The horror wasn't just in being stabbed, it was in being left with the wound, a jagged hole that turned gangrenous, infected and slow rotting. Medical care couldn't keep up. And honestly, you didn't always want it to. Your field hospital, should you be lucky enough to reach one, is a tent filled with screaming, blood pools on wooden floors, surgeons work with dull instruments, anesthetics are often in short supply, and there are so many casualties that doctors operate in assembly line fashion. Cut, saw, stitch, repeat. If your wound isn't instantly fatal, it might just be slowly fatal instead. And forget mental health support. The word trauma hasn't even made it to the trenches yet. But what about leave? That precious mythical thing you heard about, time away from the front? Yes, it exists, but it's rare, unpredictable, and over before you can truly breathe. One day you're in the trench, the next you're on a train heading towards something resembling civilization. You see a mirror and realize you don't recognize your own face. You've aged decades and months. You visit a cafe, but the taste of coffee is foreign. You sit on a real toilet and almost cry. And when you return, it's worse, because now you remember what peace feels like. Back at the front, rumors spread like mold. The Germans are running out of food. The war will end by Christmas. A new weapon is coming. Reinforcements are on their way. All lies, of course. Lies wrapped in hope. And you cling to them because hope is the only thing left that the mud hasn't stolen from you. Some men lose that too. You hear about the guy who took off his helmet, stood tall, and just walked into no man's land. They called it suicide by sniper. Others stick rifles in their mouths during a quiet night shift. One guy tried to drown himself in the trench water. It was only a few inches deep. And the worst part? None of it is over. Not yet. You're still here. You're still expected to fight. You're still holding the line. For what? You barely remember. For king and country? For honor? For some nameless patch of scorched dirt you've taken and lost a dozen times already? Maybe it's just momentum now. You keep going because stopping means thinking, and thinking means feeling, and feeling is dangerous. But then one morning, the trench is quiet. No shells, no gunfire, no orders, just stillness. And that's when you know something's wrong, because silence in the trenches is never peace. It's the breath before the scream, the hand on your shoulder before they say, "We're going over." And once again, you climb the ladder, rifle in shaking hands, bayonet fixed, mud on your boots, the ghost of yesterday's dead whispering in your ears. You don't want to go. Every cell in your body screams to lie down and play dead, but you do it, because you're a soldier now, or whatever's left of one. You cross the top and run into the fog, where bullets stitch the earth, and you can hear your own breath louder than the world. You know you won't make it. You run anyway. You made it back. You don't remember how. One moment you were running through a blizzard of bullets and screams. The next you were lying in a trench again, clutching your side, teeth chattering. Jenkins didn't come back. Neither did 24 others. But you? Somehow you keep surviving. And now, after everything, the rumors are getting louder. Not the usual lies about the war ending by Christmas, or next spring, or any day now, really. No, this time it feels different. Officers are whispering, rations are being conserved, no new offensives, even the Germans are quieter. Something's changing. But you've been burned before, haven't you? Still, the whispers grow. Armistice. The word itself feels foreign in your mouth. Armistice. The idea that all of this could just stop, that you might not die here, that you might go home and sleep in a bed, a real bed, with pillows. And then, November 11th, 1918, 11 a.m. A horn sounds, the guns stop. That's it. After years of noise, the silence is deafening. You don't cheer, no one does. You don't throw your helmet in the air, or hug anyone, or cry in relief. You just stand there, unsure of how to exist in a world that isn't exploding. The silence doesn't bring peace, it brings confusion. What now? They tell you the war is over. You stare at the cratered land, the shredded uniforms, the bodies that still haven't been buried, and you think, then why does it still look like hell? Going home isn't immediate. You wait and wait. Bureaucracy moves slowly, even slower than a wounded mule in the mud. You clean your gear, you dig more ditches, you bury more friends. The front is inactive, but the trauma doesn't know that. When they finally put you on a train, you feel nothing. No joy, no sadness, just numbness. The countryside rolls past, unchanged and unfamiliar all at once. Towns still exist. People smile. Civilians walk with both legs. You stare at them like they're ghosts. Or maybe you are. You reach your town. Your mother cries when she sees you. Your sister hugs you like she'll never let go. Your dog barks and loses its mind. But you stand awkwardly in the doorway, unsure how to inhabit your old life again. Your boots track invisible mud across the carpet. People say you're so lucky to be home. You want to scream. They ask you what it was like. You can't describe it. You say it was bad. That's the understatement of the century. They expect stories. You tell them the funny bits, the rat races, the time someone painted a mustache on the general's portrait, the guy who sang opera during artillery strikes. You don't tell them about the boy who bled out with your name on his lips. You don't tell them about the body parts you dug out of your trench wall. You don't tell them about the time you saw a man go blind from gas and walk into a fire. No one wants to hear that. You try to work, you try to date, you try to sleep, but everything is off. You flinch at loud sounds. Fireworks make your heart stop. Rain on a tin roof sounds like shelling. You can't stand in closed spaces, you can't handle crowds, you snap at people who move too fast or too close. You startle when someone drops a plate. You shout in your sleep. You wake up soaked in sweat, convinced you're still in the trench. The smell of musty earth brings tears to your eyes. You try to tell yourself it's over, but your body doesn't believe it. People move on. The world wants to forget the war. But you carry it everywhere. It's stitched into your skin, woven into your bones. You laugh at the wrong moments. You forget birthdays. You avoid public places. You drink more than you should, and you feel guilty for surviving. Because so many others didn't. They're building monuments now. Lest we forget, the plaques say. You stand in front of them, reading the names. You see Jenkins. You see Ward. You see McKinley. You don't see yourself. Because in a way, you didn't come back. Not all of you. There are parades. Uniforms are cleaned. Medals pinned. Flags waved. People cheer. But you stand in the crowd, wearing a suit that doesn't fit right. Your hands shaking. You can't join in. Because the music doesn't drown out the artillery still ringing in your skull. Sometimes you see other veterans. You nod at each other. No words, just understanding. You both know what it means to flinch at shadows and cry when no one's looking. You both know what a bayonet wound smells like, and how it feels to carry a friend who's missing half his torso. The government sends you a certificate. Thank you for your service. It's printed in gold. Looks lovely on the wall next to your nightmares. Your family wants you to be the same person, but that person drowned in mud and blood in a French trench. You're someone else now. Someone who remembers too much and feels too little. Someone who winces at the sound of thunder. Eventually, you adapt. Sort of. You find work. You fall in love. Maybe. You have kids. You try to be normal. But the past is always there, lurking just below the surface, ready to drag you back into the trench at the first smell of smoke or burst of sound. And when people ask you, years later, what was it really like in the war? You smile that same broken smile and say, you wouldn't last a day. Imagine stepping off a stagecoach into a sun-scorched town where everyone's armed, everything's dusty, and the local doctor is also the dentist, bartender, and part-time gravedigger. You haven't even unpacked your bag, and already someone's sizing you up like a side of beef. Welcome to the Wild West, where laws are more of a suggestion and your life expectancy depends on who's drunk and who's twitchy. Spoiler, you won't survive till sunset. So you think you'd thrive in the Old West, huh? Maybe you've watched too many Clint Eastwood films. Maybe you fancy yourself a gunslinger or a bold pioneer with calloused hands and a taste for adventure. But let's get one thing straight right now. You'd be dead immediately, not next week, not next month, not when the saloon brawl gets out of hand, immediately. You arrive in some fly-speck town, let's call it Dead Cactus Gulch, with nothing but a satchel, a thirst, and a wildly misplaced sense of confidence. As soon as your boots hit the dirt, the heat hits you like a slap from a sunburned mule. Your lips dry up, your shirt is already sticking to you in all the wrong places. You squint around and realize every building looks like it was built by blind, drunk termites, and is one stiff breeze away from becoming firewood. First mistake. You make eye contact with a man wearing a greasy hat, a handlebar mustache, and the cold, dead stare of someone who's buried more people than he can count. That's all it takes. In the West, eye contact is either a challenge or a death wish. You just told him with your pupils alone, "I think I can take you." Spoiler, you cannot. He spits tobacco juice in your direction and walks away, but not before muttering something that sounds suspiciously like a threat. Congratulations. You've been in town for 90 seconds and you're already on someone's revenge list. You think maybe a drink will help. You stagger into the nearest saloon, a swirling vortex of sawdust, cigar smoke, bad piano music, and worse decisions. The bartender has one eye and no patience. The man in the corner is playing poker with a grin that says he cheats and a knife that says he doesn't care if you notice. A couple of working women size you up like they're deciding whether you're worth the effort. You order whiskey. It tastes like regret and kerosene. You cough. Everyone turns to look. Someone calls you fancy. Someone else suggests taking you outside and seeing if you bleed like a man. You laugh nervously. Mistake number 2. In the West, laughter is a signal that you're either crazy or soft. Either way, someone's gonna test it. And then, because your luck is cursed, a bar fight breaks out. You're caught between a table and someone's very sharp boots. Chairs fly, bottles break, a tooth lands in your glass. Someone yells, "Yeehaw!" unironically. You try to duck but get elbowed in the face by a man named Stumpy, who's missing 3 fingers and smells like pickled onions. When it's over, you're bleeding from the scalp, the sheriff's hauling people off in pairs, and the bartender is charging you for the glass and the tooth. You limp back outside, your pride shattered and your shirt torn. You've now been in town for less than an hour. You're bruised, broke, and on someone's bad side, but you're just getting started. Let's talk about hygiene, or rather, the lack thereof. You haven't seen a real bath in days. The local bathhouse is a glorified trough, and the water hasn't been changed since the Grant administration. You strip down and sit in the lukewarm muck while some drunk cowboy on the other side of the curtain sings off-key and spits into the tub. There's a rat floating near your foot. You decide not to think about it. Your clothes are stiff with sweat and dust. Your boots are 2 sizes too small because you had to trade your real pair for that bar tab. You're now walking like someone with a hernia and a death wish. What about food? Glad you asked. You saunter into the nearest diner, which is actually a woman named Ethel cooking stew in a pot that's older than civilization. The stew contains some kind of meat, possibly squirrel, possibly possum, possibly something that barked last week. The bread is so hard you could use it as a weapon. The coffee is strong enough to remove rust from metal. You eat it anyway. Why? Because if you don't, you will die. Later you'll discover the stew gave you gastrointestinal revenge. You'll spend a night groaning behind the stables, contemplating death, praying to gods you don't believe in, and swearing off stew forever. Ethel will wave at you the next morning. You'll cry a little. Let's move on to housing. You ask around for a place to sleep and are pointed toward a boarding house. Sounds civilized, right? Wrong. The room costs more than you have. The bed is stuffed with hay, and the guy in the next room coughs like he's been embalmed alive. You lie awake all night, itchy, cold, and wondering if the bedbugs here bite harder than the men outside. Eventually, you doze off, only to be woken at dawn by a gunshot. That's just the local rooster. He's startled by everything, including his own shadow, and yes, he lives inside the boarding house. Stumbling out into the street with red eyes and a bruised ego, you realize the town's daily rhythm is set by violence. By noon, there's already been a knife fight behind the livery, a bar shootout, and some poor soul dragged out of town tied to his own mule. No one blinks. The sheriff shrugs. That's just Tuesday. And speaking of the sheriff, let's be clear. Law enforcement in the Wild West is a myth. The sheriff's job is less about keeping peace and more about not dying. He's underpaid, overwhelmed, and over it. He spends most of his time drinking, bribing people to not start gunfights, and occasionally arresting someone just to prove he still can. You want help? You'll get a shrug and a warning. Don't poke the rattlesnakes, kid. But you? Oh, you've already poked several. You walked into town looking like you might own land or money. You made eye contact. You tried to drink like a local. You used the phrase "excuse me" unironically. Now you've got a target on your back and a handful of enemies with poor impulse control. By the end of the day, you've managed to offend a gambler, a drunk, a very possessive horse owner, and a preacher who overheard you swearing. You're now due for a duel at sundown, whether you agreed to it or not. Why? Because someone claimed you cheated at cards. Cards you weren't even playing. You consider running. But this is the West, and there's no such thing as just leaving. You run and someone will track you. You hide and someone will smoke you out. You stand your ground and someone will shoot you anyway. Every choice ends with the same result, you catching a bullet. So you do the only thing left. You walk to Main Street as the sun sets, boots dragging, heart thudding, hands shaking. Your opponent is already there, twirling his revolver and smiling like a man who enjoys this way too much. The townsfolk gather around, ready for blood and entertainment, and that's where we leave you, for now. One day in the Wild West, dust in your mouth, sweat in your eyes, fear in your chest. You wanted adventure. You got a coffin with your name on it. You're standing in the center of Main Street, blinking into the setting sun, wondering how your first 24 hours in the Wild West ended in a duel to the death. Your opponent, some wiry psychopath named Buck or Clem or Razor, taps the butt of his revolver like it's an extension of his soul. The townsfolk have gathered like vultures around a gut pile. Someone's eating peanuts. A drunk yells, "Shoot his hat off!" You don't even own a gun. The sheriff mutters the rules like it's all a formality. 10 paces, turn, shoot. But here's a little secret. In the Wild West, no one waited for 10 paces. No one played fair. If the other guy shoots you on pace 2, well, it's your own fault for not anticipating his character. You try to bluff, maybe talk your way out of it. You raise your hands and say, "Let's be reasonable." That's when Buck Clem Razor fires a warning shot that takes your hat clean off. It hits the ground smoldering. The crowd roars with delight. You do the only rational thing. You run. You dive into a water trough, scramble through a pig pen, leap over a fence, and somehow hide in a pile of hay behind the blacksmiths. You stay there for 3 hours. You're covered in mud, sweat, and pig manure, but hey, you're not dead. That counts as a win. By morning, word has spread. You're the coward from the coast. Kids throw rocks at you. Someone painted a target on your door. You try to protest, but the town has already decided. You didn't stand your ground, so you're not a real man. Just a walking insult to frontier masculinity. You try to lay low and rethink your life choices, but there's no such thing as laying low in a town this small. The saloon girls gossip. The blacksmith laughs every time he sees you. Even the horses seem to sneer. You haven't even caught your breath, and the West is already tightening the noose. Let's talk about horses, by the way. You figured riding would be easy, right? Just hop on, kick, and go. Wrong. Wild West horses are not the docile, romantic beasts from storybooks. They are semi-feral, muscular tanks fueled by hate, oats, and a profound distaste for newcomers. You rent one named Maud. Cute name, big mistake. Maud is the equine equivalent of a bar bouncer with anger issues. The second you get on, she bolts sideways, scrapes you against a fence post, bucks once for fun, and then stops in the middle of the street to relieve herself for 9 full minutes. When you finally manage to stay in the saddle for more than 2 blocks, she decides to chase a chicken. You hold on, screaming, flailing, losing a boot, a tooth, and most of your pride. Eventually you stagger back into town, looking like you lost a fight with a wagon wheel. Everyone laughs, even the preacher. You try to laugh too, but your ribs hurt. Also, you're bleeding from somewhere you can't quite identify. Desperate to avoid further public humiliation, you sign on for honest work. Maybe you can turn this around. You find a listing on the notice board, wanted, ranch hand. You show up at dawn, still sore, still limping. The foreman looks you over, spits, and says, "Hope you ain't allergic to cow shot." You're not. By noon, you wish you were. You spend the day branding calves, dodging hooves, falling in manure, and being called city biscuit by every other man on the property. Lunch is salt pork and black coffee. Your hands are blistered. Your back feels like it was stepped on by Maud. You're stung by bees, bitten by ants, and nearly gored by a bull named Clarence. You last 3 days, barely. On day 4, you wake up covered in ticks and quit with tears in your eyes and cow dung in your socks. But now it's time to face an even greater danger than duels or wild livestock: disease. The Wild West was a paradise for germs. You think modern illness is bad? Try dysentery without antibiotics, or typhoid in a town that thinks bathing is suspiciously French. Clean water is a rumor. Medicine is whiskey and leeches. Doctors are usually barbers with a scalpel and a god complex. You get sick. Of course you do. Maybe from the stew. Maybe from that communal cup at the saloon. Maybe from the rat that crawled across your face while you slept in the hayloft. Doesn't matter. You wake up sweating, shaking, and vomiting like your organs are trying to escape. You drag yourself to the doctor, who's also the undertaker. He smells like cigar smoke and regret. He listens to your chest, says, and offers you two choices, laudanum or amputation. You take the laudanum. It helps in the sense that you stop caring about being sick. You spend 3 days hallucinating on a cot, muttering apologies to a chair you think is your mother. When you finally regain lucidity, you've soiled yourself, someone's stolen your boots, and the doc's given your hat to a guy who needed it more. You go back to the saloon, barefoot, filthy, and delirious, hoping for a drink to numb the shame. The bartender serves you a shot of something clear and horrifying. You swallow it, and it burns a hole through your esophagus. At this point, you consider becoming a criminal. Why not? The outlaws in town are the only ones who look clean and fed. You meet a guy named Jasper who says you've got the look of desperation. He offers you a gig, robbing the mail coach. You nod, thinking, sure, how hard can that be? Answer, extremely. On the big day, everything goes wrong. The horses bolt too early. The driver has a shotgun. Your gun misfires and burns your thumb. Jasper trips over a cactus. You end up hiding in a ditch while the coach careens away into the distance. You're arrested within an hour. The sheriff sighs like he's too tired to even insult you. He tosses you in the jail, a one-room shack with a window and no lock. You could escape, but you don't. You just lie there, staring at the ceiling, wondering how it all went so horribly wrong. After a few days, the sheriff lets you out, on account of how pathetic you look. He hands you your shirt, now missing both sleeves, and says, "Try not to die in town, it's bad for business." You shuffle out, exhausted, filthy, covered in bruises, missing a tooth, and significantly more humble than you were when you stepped off the stagecoach. You are now officially a true Western resident. You've been shot at, kicked, sickened, robbed, humiliated, and dumped in a trough. Your clothes don't match, your hygiene is illegal, and you smell like smoked despair. And guess what? That's only day 2. You've survived a duel, barely. You've been kicked by a horse, poisoned by stew, humiliated by children, and briefly imprisoned. At this point, you'd think the Wild West has thrown all it can at you, but no. This place is a gift that keeps on giving. Now it wants your money, your dignity, and your sanity. Let's begin with that noble frontier tradition, gambling. You walk into the saloon, trying to act like someone who isn't teetering on the edge of emotional collapse. You sit at a poker table. Mistake number 1. Everyone around you looks like they've either killed someone over a card game or are planning to. One guy has an eye patch, another's chewing a matchstick like he's auditioning for a Clint Eastwood tribute show. The dealer's hands move faster than physics should allow. You barely know the rules, but bluff your way through a few rounds using sheer panic and luck. Then you win a hand, a big one. That's your second mistake. You smile. Big mistake. You gloat. Catastrophic mistake. The table goes quiet. Everyone stares. The guy with the eye patch mutters something about marking cheaters. You try to explain that it was luck, honest luck, just beginners. Too late. The man across from you flips the table. You're tackled. Someone punches you in the kidney. Your coins scatter. You try to crawl away but get dragged back by your ankle. The sheriff walks in, sees the fight, and immediately arrests you. You spend another night in jail. It's still unlocked, still humiliating. This time you're sharing the cell with a guy who won't stop humming the same hymn over and over. You ask him why. He says, "Keeps the devil away." You ask if it works. He looks at you dead in the eye and says, "You're still here, ain't you?" Now you're broke. Again, no prospects, no friends, and half a hat. Your next brilliant plan? Attend a revival meeting outside town. You hear there's free food. You're that desperate. You show up to find a crowd gathered around a man in a white suit shouting into the sky. He's sweating like a furnace and waving a Bible so fast you worry he's going to generate lift. He's got a pitch, salvation, redemption, and snake oil. No, seriously. He's selling a tonic that heals all ailments, cleanses sin, and makes you virile enough to father a county. He's got jars of it lined up. You try one. It tastes like mint, regret, and gasoline. You spend the next 3 hours seeing colors that don't exist. The preacher sees your dazed state and calls it a spiritual awakening. He tries to baptize you in a horse trough. You vomit. A woman faints. A child cries. You crawl away and collapse behind the tent, vowing never to trust anyone with slicked back hair and a mustache again. As you recover, you meet a prospector named Silas who insists there's gold just beyond the ridge. You're skeptical, but what do you have to lose, besides your remaining self-respect? You follow him for 2 days through cactus fields, rattlesnake nests, and a mountain pass that's almost entirely uphill. You sleep under the stars. Sounds romantic, right? Wrong. The stars are cold, coyotes howl like banshees, and something definitely licked your face while you were asleep. Finally, you reach the gold site. It's a hole. A literal hole in the ground. Silas hands you a rusted pan and a pickaxe that looks like it lost a duel with time. You dig and dig and dig. Nothing. Silas vanishes on day 3. You suspect he was never real. Now you're in the desert, lost, sunburnt, hallucinating again. This time without the benefit of snake oil. You stagger back to town, talking to your shoes, convinced one of them is named Harold. Back in town, you try to find work again, this time as a handyman. You fix fences, shoe horses, badly, sweep porches, and briefly attempt to repair a steam engine, which explodes in your face. The saloon owner gives you a coin out of pity. You buy a meal, the stew again, you are a fool. And then comes loneliness. Not the I wish I had friends kind. No, this is existential, marrow-deep frontier loneliness. You sit on the edge of town watching the sunset, thinking about your life choices, the family you haven't heard from in months, and whether that chicken you befriended earlier is your best friend now. Her name is Henrietta. She pecks out Morse code. You write letters you never send. You talk to strangers who don't respond. You dream of your old life, indoor plumbing, vegetables, socks without holes. You start crying one night and don't even know why. The West has broken you. And just when you think things can't get any more absurd, the railroad comes. A crew of rough men rides in on a metal beast of smoke and fire, laying track through town like it owns the place. They bring more noise, more dust, more chaos. The saloon raises its prices, the town grows, but not in a good way. There's more crime, more fights, more corpses. You try to get work with the railroad. They give you a shovel and a death wish. The foreman yells non-stop. You're surrounded by dynamite, drunk engineers, and men who treat safety like a foreign concept. One guy loses 3 fingers and finishes the day anyway. You accidentally hit your thumb and almost pass out. The other workers nickname you Princess. You quit by lunch. At this point, you've learned a few things. Never play poker with a man who carries his own coffin. Never trust stew that smells like varnish. Never accept tonic from a man with glowing teeth. And most of all, you're not cut out for the Wild West. You're not tough. You're not cunning. You're not morally flexible enough to survive in a place where law is just a rumor and kindness gets you shot. You used to think it was about grit and guns. But the truth? It's about endurance. It's a place where the strong die, the clever run, and the unlucky end up buried behind the livery stable under a crooked wooden cross. And somehow, you're still here, not thriving, barely surviving, but alive. For now. You're still breathing, somehow. After duels, dysentery, public disgrace, horse-induced trauma, and multiple run-ins with men named Buck, Clem, and Snake-Eyed Jimmy, you've clawed your way to day 4 in the Wild West. That alone should qualify you for sainthood, or institutionalization, but don't get cocky, because here comes the final act. This isn't the part where you ride into the sunset with a girl on your hip and a bag of gold in your saddle. This is the part where the West gets tired of playing with you and decides to put you down like the sick dog you are. It starts with a letter. The first you've gotten since you arrived. It's from home. The handwriting is familiar. The words are warm. Someone misses you. Someone remembers who you were before you became a sunburnt husk with wild eyes and twitchy fingers. You read it 3 times. You even smell the envelope. And for a moment, you think, maybe I could go back. Then you walk outside and see that the general store is on fire. The barber is holding someone hostage with a pair of scissors, and there's a new bounty posted on the saloon wall, with your face on it. Someone put a price on your head. For what? For cheating at cards? For not dying in that duel? For borrowing a horse and forgetting to return it during your 3-day fugue state in the desert? Doesn't matter. In the West, accusation is conviction. A poster is as good as a death sentence. And now bounty hunters will come crawling out of every snake hole between here and Kansas. You try to deny it. Try to reason with the sheriff. He sighs and says, "I'd help you, kid, but I got 3 deputies and 2 of them are drunk." The third thinks he's a cactus. He wishes you luck and slides you a half-empty bottle of whiskey as a parting gift. You don't even get time to pack. The first bounty hunter arrives at sundown. He's a walking cliché, black hat, black duster, a face like dried jerky, and eyes that haven't blinked since the Civil War. He calls himself Reckon. No last name, just Reckon. He doesn't talk much. He just points at the poster, then at you. You run, again, through the back alleys, over a fence, under a horse cart. You knock over a bucket, a small child, and at least 1 chicken. You don't care. You hear bullets whizzing past your head. You duck behind the blacksmith shop, again. You owe that man so many apologies. You grab a half-sharpened horseshoe and hurl it in desperation. It hits Reckon in the knee. He growls like an injured grizzly. You flee into the hills. Now you're an outlaw, whether you like it or not. You sleep in caves. You eat raw jerky and stolen apples. You avoid the main roads. Every snapping twig makes your heart seize. You think you hear a harmonica at night. You cry a little, just a little. Eventually, hunger drives you back. You sneak into town in disguise. Straw hat, fake mustache, poncho. You look like a deranged scarecrow. Somehow it works. No one notices. They're too busy watching a public hanging in the square. You see the victim has a familiar nose. You look in a window. Another bounty poster, this time with a higher reward. You realize you've become famous, or infamous, or whatever word best fits half-mythical loser with a death sentence and no pants. So what now? You find a hideout, an abandoned shack on the outskirts. You patch the roof. You catch rainwater. You even find a cat. You name her Lady Meowington. For a time, things are almost peaceful. You watch sunsets. You write bad poetry. You talk to the cat more than you should. But peace doesn't last long out here. It's the West. The silence is just the setup for the next explosion. And it comes. One night, Reckon finds you again. Of course he does. The man tracks footprints like a bloodhound possessed. He calls out your name like it's a hymn. You step outside, holding a shotgun that hasn't worked properly since 1883. The cat watches from a window. He says, "Time's up, kid." You say, "Do I get a last request?" He shrugs. "Make it quick." You ask for 10 minutes to pet the cat and say goodbye to your dreams. He blinks, says, "That's a new one." He waits. You stall as long as you can. You talk about sunsets, stew, saloons, snake oil, horses, how you hate dust, how you once kissed a cactus thinking it was a woman in a green shawl. He nods occasionally. You think maybe you're wearing him down. Then he draws. So do you. It's fast. It's messy. It's not cinematic. You shoot first. The gun jams. He shoots second. Your hat flies off. You scream. Not because you're hit, but because your scalp is bleeding and you're not even sure from what. Reckon limps towards you. Your hands shake. You throw the cat. She claws his face. He curses. You tackle him. You both go down in the dust, punching, swearing, biting, until finally, you sit on his chest, breathing like a steam engine, aiming the broken shotgun at his nose. "I surrender," he wheezes. You blink. "What?" "I said I surrender. You win. I ain't dying for $30. You lower the gun. He limps away, muttering something about moving to Florida. You sit in the dust, stunned, victorious, alone. The sun rises, the wind kicks up a dust devil. You look down at your torn clothes, your bruises, your bleeding scalp, and your shaking hands, and you laugh. You laugh like a madman, because this is it. This is your life now. You can't go back. You can't stay. You're too wild for the East, too weak for the West. You're the walking ghost of 1,000 bad decisions. So you saddle up. Yes, on Maud, because she's still here, still bitter, still the only creature that tolerates you, and you ride, not toward anything, not away from anything, just forward, because that's what the Wild West is, a place where there's no destination, just dirt, regret, gunpowder, and the vague hope that maybe, just maybe, tomorrow won't suck as hard as today. Spoiler, it probably will, but at least you know how to shoot now. Sort of.
Imagine stepping into a dim Renaissance laboratory lit only by sputtering tallow candles and a fire that's dangerously close to exploding. Bottles clink, vapors hiss, and an old man with no eyebrows and suspicious burns on his hands asks if you'd like to help summon the spirit of Mercury, or maybe just make gold out of rat bones. Spoiler, you won't survive long enough to find out. You wake up in the year 1504. Italy, maybe? Or possibly Prague. The language is weird, the smells are aggressive, and the first thing you see is a man urinating out of a window while screaming something about the moon's alignment. Welcome to the Renaissance, the golden age of art, philosophy, and pseudoscientific chaos. But you're not here to hang out with Da Vinci or sip wine with Machiavelli. No, you've made a terrible mistake. You took a wrong turn and ended up in the smoky, sulfur-reeking workshop of an alchemist. Or possibly a sorcerer. Hard to tell. He's wearing robes, there are bones on the table, and a severed goose foot is nailed to the door like a doorbell. The man's name is Master Ulrich. His beard is singed, his eyes twitch in different directions, and he greets you by throwing a handful of salt into the fire and shrieking in Latin. You nod politely. That was your first mistake. That means you're now his apprentice. Ulrich immediately puts you to work grinding something in a mortar. You don't ask what it is. You don't want to know. It smells like if garlic married a corpse and had a baby made of nightmares. As you stir, Ulrich pours mercury from one flask into another, spills half on the floor, and chuckles ominously. You're now breathing mercury vapor. Congratulations, your lungs are slowly turning into poison balloons. You ask what the goal is. He says, "To awaken the dragon within lead." You nod again. Second mistake. Alchemy in the Renaissance is a confusing soup of science, mysticism, wishful thinking, and straight-up arson. You're not just trying to turn lead into gold. Oh no. That's the casual Friday of alchemy. You're also trying to capture the quintessence of celestial bodies, trap spirits in glass jars, distill the elixir of life from fermented toad's sweat, and not accidentally summon a demon by mispronouncing Hebrew. Spoiler, you will accidentally summon a demon. Ulrich shows you his prized possession, a philosopher's egg. It's not actually an egg. It's a chunk of black rock wrapped in copper wire and stored in a jar of vinegar. He says it hums when the moon is right. You lean in to listen. It shocks you. You fall over. He laughs for 5 straight minutes. Later that day, you're told to help extract essence of basilisk. You ask what a basilisk is. He says it's in the cellar. You are not going into the cellar. Instead, you're handed a stack of books, thick, dusty tomes bound in leather, some written in Latin, others in incomprehensible symbols, all covered in marginalia that may or may not be blood. You find one diagram that looks like a cow being crucified on a flaming wheel. Another shows a man turning into a tree while vomiting gold coins. You ask for clarification. Ulrich whispers, "Knowledge cannot be spoon-fed. It must be inhaled." He then demonstrates by literally inhaling dust from a manuscript and entering a trance where he speaks in tongues and knocks over an alembic full of boiling frog fat. You spend the next hour cleaning it up with your sleeves. Around midnight, he decides it's time for your first true test. You're going to help him invoke planetary energy to fuse iron with the soul of Mars. There's a chant. There's a brass astrolabe. There's some chicken blood. You hold the iron rod. He begins the chant. The room vibrates. Something howls from the chimney. The door slams shut. Ulrich screams, "Too much Mars!" and tackles you. The rod glows red hot and explodes. You wake up covered in soot and with no eyebrows. Ulrich tells you the ritual was inconclusive and offers you wine that tastes like sadness and lavender. At this point, you're probably wondering, where's the line between alchemy and magic? There isn't one. In this part of the Renaissance, every second scholar is half chemist, half necromancer. They quote Aristotle in one breath and threaten to hex your cattle in the next. It's all about symbols, correspondences, planetary influences, sacred geometry, and raw, unfiltered delusion. And let's be clear, no one washes their hands. You're touching lead, arsenic, quicksilver, and moldy owl feathers all day. There are no goggles, no gloves, no OSHA posters. Just a chalk circle on the floor and the sound of something squelching in a jar behind you. Sleep? You don't get sleep. Ulrich believes dreams are unfiltered messages from the spheres, and insists on waking you up every hour to recite your visions. One night you dream of drowning in a vat of cheese. He declares it a sign that Venus is angry. He throws your shoes into a river as an offering. The next morning, the village priest visits. He's suspicious. Ulrich puts on a wig and claims he's a philosopher of natural mysteries. You're told to nod and smile. The priest blesses the house, glares at the jars of floating fetuses, and leaves muttering something about eternal damnation. You finally ask, half joking, if you're going to get burned at the stake. Ulrich doesn't laugh. Instead, he shows you the escape tunnel under the lab. Just in case, he says. Sometimes the Pope has mood swings. You think of quitting, walking away, starting a new life as a mud farmer or a plague grave digger. But you're already coughing blood, glowing faintly in the dark, and possibly cursed. You're too far gone. That's when Ulrich starts talking about transmutation. Not the metaphorical kind. He means real, bodily change. We shall make ourselves divine, he says, eyes wild. We shall become more than human. The flesh will submit. The stars will bend. You're now an ingredient in your master's final experiment. Good luck with that. It's the second hour of your glorious Renaissance alchemical apprenticeship, and your face is already peeling from accidental fume exposure. You've coughed up something yellow, your vision has narrowed to a tunnel, and your master, Ulrich the ever-twitching, is stirring a boiling cauldron while mumbling in a mix of Latin and what might be Hungarian. But hey, at least now you know how to identify powdered bat's skull by taste. That's progress. This morning starts with a cheerful assignment, transcribing a forbidden manuscript written in cursed ink on vellum made from criminal flesh. The quill is humming. The letters rearrange themselves when you look away. One page mentions the tears of Saturn, and immediately begins weeping actual brine. You tried to skip a passage. The ink begins bleeding through the page and seeps into your fingernails. Ulrich pats your back and says, "Ah, it recognizes you. You are now the owner of a semi-sentient book. Congratulations. It will whisper things to you while you sleep." You turn to Ulrich, who's busy drawing a pentagram with something that looks and smells suspiciously like pig's blood and fennel. "What's this one for?" you ask, hoping it's not another failed summoning of Mars. He shrugs. "We're sending a letter to the Invisible College." The Invisible College is not, as you might hope, an escape route. It's a shadowy network of Renaissance weirdos, Hermetic scholars, necromancers, and old men with extra toes who think the future lies in blending Kabbalah with metallurgy. They pass cryptic messages in symbols, backward Latin, or carved into fruit. Ulrich writes his message in lemon juice and tells you to deliver it to a one-eyed man in the apothecary who wears a ferret on his shoulder. You go. The man is there. The ferret hisses at you. You pass the letter. The man bites a coin, nods, and vanishes into a wall. Back at the lab, Ulrich is wearing nothing but an apron and chanting to the spirit of fire. The oven is glowing. The mercury is bubbling. You ask what he's doing. "Making a homunculus," he says proudly. You blink. What?" "A miniature man," he explains, grinning like a lunatic. "Born not of woman, but of flask." You glance at the glass jar on the table. It contains something gelatinous. It moves. You scream. Ulrich hushes you. Don't startle him. He's sensitive. You are now helping raise an alchemical fetus in a bottle. It must be fed powdered opal, blood from a rooster born under a lunar eclipse, and your personal regrets, which you recite to it nightly like bedtime stories. It responds by glowing softly and twitching in time with your heartbeat. Ulrich names it Reginald. Meanwhile, you begin noticing the other alchemists in town. Not all are as charmingly deranged as Ulrich. Some are worse. There's Master Faustus down the road, who claims to have distilled the soul of fire into a paste. His tower exploded twice last week. There's Sister Apollonia, a nun who brews potions that grant prophetic dreams, though the last man who drank one now only speaks in riddles and screams whenever he sees bread. You meet Brother Heinrich, who's halfway through turning his own bones into silver, to please the moon goddess. You ask if it hurts. He says, "Only when I breathe." You try to make friends. You bond with a young assistant named Lena. She's clever, funny, and only mildly cursed. She warns you that alchemists are competitive. Very competitive. She shows you a note slipped under her door that simply reads, "Your gold is false and your spirit impure. The salamanders watch." You laugh. She doesn't. One night, you and Lena attempt a simple experiment together, making philosopher's salt. It's supposed to smell like violets and unlock the secrets of memory. It actually sets your eyebrows on fire. Again. Ulrich is thrilled. "It means the salt is potent," he cries, scooping it into a jar with his bare hands. The lab is full of jars now. So many jars. Glowing, smoking, twitching jars. One moans softly at night. Another sings in Latin when the wind blows. You start naming them. One is Margaret. Another is Blister. You're not sure if this is helping or making things worse. Meanwhile, the church is starting to notice. A visiting inquisitor rides through town. He wears a cross that looks suspiciously like a sword and has the eyes of a man who's burned a library for fun. Ulrich tells you to hide the frog skeletons and the goat fetus that glows. You spend 3 hours scrubbing chalk sigils off the walls with vinegar. The Inquisitor interrogates you. "What is the purpose of your studies?" he growls. You panic. You say, "To find God in matter." He stares. Then slowly nods. Acceptable. For now. You survive. But the pressure is growing. The church wants purity. The alchemists want power. The people want you gone. And you? You just want to go 5 minutes without hallucinating from arsenic fumes. Ulrich begins acting stranger. He doesn't sleep. He talks to walls. He begins building a machine he calls the Wheel of Becoming. It's made of brass, mirrors, and desperation. He says it will let him see the universal code. It hums ominously. You ask Lena what he means. She says, "I think he's trying to speak to the soul of the cosmos." You ask, "What if the cosmos doesn't want to talk?" She shrugs. "Then we all explode." She's probably right. Because that night, the homunculus speaks. Just one word. In perfect Latin. Consume. You and Ulrich both freeze. He starts laughing. You start screaming. It's going to be a long night. You now live with a talking homunculus in a jar. His name is still Reginald. His voice is small but authoritative, like a tiny bureaucrat made of mucus and hubris. Every night he chants things like, "Transcend the flesh," or "Feed me gold or feed me lies." You're not sure if he's sentient, possessed, or just channeling the collective agony of the human race through a pickled embryonic consciousness. Ulrich thinks this is progress. You think it's a cry for help. Reginald now has a little robe. Ulrich sewed it from mouse leather, and he demands to be present during all experiments. He judges your fire tending harshly. One night he yells, "The crucible is impure," and the entire table bursts into green flame. You're losing sleep. Lena says it's normal. "My first homunculus just moaned until it decayed." She shrugs. "At least Reginald has ambition." Ambition is right. He started drawing symbols on the inside of his jar using his own fluids. You swear they're moving. He wants a bigger jar. Ulrich is considering it. Meanwhile, your mentor's wheel of becoming is almost complete. It now spins constantly, powered by melted copper, rat bones, and the breath of Venus, which is just code for an extremely flammable gas made by boiling urine and rosewater. Ulrich says he's on the brink of piercing the veil of the world. You ask what happens if he succeeds? He says, either we ascend to pure light, or time collapses in on itself. You've started sleeping under a lead plate. Things take a sharp turn south when Ulrich receives an invitation. A dinner party. Hosted by the local circle of the Red Hourglass, a semi-secret society of alchemists, sorcerers, cryptomancers, and that one guy who claims to be half manticore. Ulrich is thrilled. They don't invite just anyone, he says, trying on a cloak that appears to be made from bat wings and regret. You're less thrilled. Lena warns you. These people make Ulrich look like a quib. But you go. You have to. Apprentices don't say no to invitations carved into obsidian and delivered by a crow with human teeth. The location is an abandoned abbey deep in the woods. The kind of place that hums when you get near it. The guards at the door are wearing bird masks and smell like copper. You walk into a great stone hall lit by a chandelier made from whale bones and human hair. There are 13 seats at the table. Reginald rides in your satchel, humming something that sounds like a Gregorian chant run backward. The guests are eclectic. A woman with golden eyes and a snake wrapped around her neck who claims she's 117 and lives on quartz. A man with no mouth who communicates through floating ink suspended in midair. A smiling figure in a velvet cloak who never blinks and only refers to himself as Mr. Mirror. Dinner is served. The soup contains floating eyeballs. The meat might be iguana or philosopher. The wine fizzes when you breathe near it. Midway through the meal, the host announces, "Tonight, we shall exchange secrets." It's tradition. Each guest must offer one truth in exchange for another. You try to pass. You say you're just an apprentice. Mr. Mirror says, "Then you shall trade a piece of your mind." They mean it literally. A servant, possibly a golem made of clay and despair, presses a crystal against your temple. It pulls out a glowing orb. A memory. You don't know which one. You feel lighter, dumber, a little hollow inside. They give you a vial in return. You drink it. You now know how to make a powder that makes frogs sing the names of the dead. Useful? No. Terrifying? Deeply. After dinner, the entertainment begins. It's an alchemical duel. 2 mages. 2 flasks. 1 target. They mix powders, shout incantations, and fling exploding vials at each other while the crowd claps politely. The loser ends up bald and glowing. The winner is crowned with a live ferret. Ulrich is invited to duel next. He accepts. He loses. Badly. He's turned partially translucent and keeps repeating the word, Widdershins, for a full hour. You drag him home, scorched and muttering. Reginald hisses something about the failures of meat. You consider just leaving, vanishing into the woods, joining a monastery, maybe even becoming a dentist. Anything normal. But the next morning, Ulrich says it's time to awaken the magnum opus. That's the big one. The great work. The final transmutation. You're going to try and turn your own essence into pure spiritual gold. The process? A bath in mercury, followed by fasting and chanting, burning your fingernails and offering the ashes to the one who waits, drinking a tincture of nightshade, lead shavings, and moonlight. You ask Ulrich how many have survived this. He says, "None. But they almost did." You try to stall. You go to Lena. She looks tired. She shows you her own hands. They glow faintly now. She's done the ritual. Twice. Her voice sometimes echoes when she laughs. She hasn't slept in 3 weeks. You realize you're not just apprenticing under madness, you're becoming part of it. And it's too late to turn back. Because that night you dream in symbols. The emerald tablet speaks to you. The walls of the lab breathe. Reginald whispers, "It is almost time." You wake up with a symbol etched into your chest that you didn't draw. Ulrich weeps with joy. You are now the vessel. You're awake. Your skin is marked. The stars seem louder than usual. Welcome to the magnum opus, the final stage of Renaissance alchemical madness, where sleep is a sin, time is a suggestion, and your bodily fluids are about to be weaponized metaphysically. Ulrich is ecstatic. The signs are here. He shouts while pouring antimony over a fire that's already belching purple smoke. The vessel is ready! The vessel, if it's not clear, is you. You try to object. But you're interrupted by Reginald the homunculus, who now floats 6 inches above his jar and speaks fluent Latin, French, and passive aggression. He declares this the dawn of the transmutation. Then he vomits gold dust. Ulrich calls it a blessing. You call it a medical emergency. Lena shows up. Her pupils are vertical. She's brought a book bound in stitched together eyelids and says it contains the lost final pages of Paracelsus. The book comes. You ask if it's safe. She says no, but it's necessary. The ritual is set for midnight. Preparation involves purifying the air with a mix of frankincense, opium, and regret. Standing naked in a salt circle while Ulrich draws sigils on your back using squid ink and your own blood. Reciting the Tabula Smaragdina backwards while balancing on one foot. At this point, your body is a temple, specifically, one that's collapsing under centuries of spiritual looting and pigeon infestation. The lab is now a temple of chaos, candles arranged in Fibonacci spirals, alembics hissing with unknown fluids, and a goat in the corner wearing a tiny crown. No one explains the goat. The goat won't stop staring at you. The stars align. Or, as Ulrich puts it, the heavens open. The veil grows thin. Tonight, we steal a kiss from God. You're not sure what that means, but based on the sounds outside, a mix of wolf howls and what might be singing metal, it's not good. The ritual begins. Ulrich chants. Lena pours the elixir of absolute essence into your mouth. It tastes like fermented licorice and melted coins. Your vision fractures into colors you don't have names for. Reginald hovers above you, shrieking the names of forgotten stars. Then you leave your body. No, really. You look down and see yourself. Pale. Glowing faintly. Steam rising from your skin. You are now pure essence. A soul, raw and unfiltered. And it sucks. Your thoughts echo. You see every decision you've ever made as a glowing orb of shame. You feel the weight of every worm you accidentally stepped on. Every lie. Every time you laughed at someone's hat. Then you float upward, out of the lab, into the sky, and beyond. You see the great mechanism, the cosmic machinery of the universe. It's horrifying. It's beautiful. It's full of screaming angels made of geometry. One of them notices you. It whispers, "You were not invited." You scream. You fall. Back into your body. Into the lab. Into fire. The ritual has gone wrong. Reginald has exploded. His jar is shattered. His last words were, "It was always supposed to end like this." The goat is gone. Lena is laughing, except it's not Lena anymore. Her eyes are spinning wheels. She levitates. She chants in 6 languages at once. Ulrich tries to control the energy, but it's too much. The wheel of becoming shatters. Time hiccups. You see a future version of yourself as a burnt-out husk wandering a desert made of ash and broken compasses. The ceiling cracks. A spirit emerges, vague, robed in smoke, eyes like sinking stars. It looks at you. "You opened the gate," it says. Now you must feed it. You scream. I didn't mean to. It replies. That is what they all say. The lab collapses. You wake up in the rubble. Alone. Burned. Covered in chalk, mercury, and what might be goat hair. Ulrich is gone. Lena is gone. Reginald is dust. You stagger outside. The moon looks wrong. The stars are twitching. The townsfolk find you wandering and gibbering about homunculi and cosmic teeth. They say you've been missing for 3 weeks. They say no such laboratory exists. You try to show them the ruins, but there's nothing there. Just an old abbey. Long abandoned. They put you in a room with soft walls. You spend your days muttering alchemical formulae and drawing Ouroboros symbols on your arms. At night you dream of Reginald's voice whispering, "It's not over." And maybe it isn't. Because one day you cough, and gold dust falls from your mouth. Imagine waking up on a damp wooden floor, reeking of smoked herring and wet fur. There's a man with a braided beard sharpening an axe beside your head. A chicken is staring at you. The only word anyone seems to know is, "Skull!" And they keep yelling it while throwing meat in your face. Welcome to your new life among the Vikings. Spoiler, you're not gonna make it. Let's set the scene. You're dropped smack into the middle of a Viking settlement somewhere around the year 875 C. It's cold. Always cold. The kind of cold that seeps into your bones and makes your teeth hurt. The wind feels personal, like it holds a grudge against your entire bloodline. Your new home? A longhouse. It's not exactly a 5-star hotel. It's a smoky, drafty, glorified barn shared with 20 people, 3 goats, 6 chickens, and a pig that keeps biting your foot while you sleep. The walls are smeared with soot. There's no chimney, just a hole in the roof and a prayer that the smoke finds its way out before your lungs give up. You're already coughing. Your skin is dry. Your clothes, if you're lucky enough to have them, are itchy wool, crusted with dried sweat and possibly blood. And congratulations, you've been mistaken for a thrall. That's a fancy Norse word for slave. Your first job? Empty the communal toilet pit, which is less a pit and more a swampy hole behind the pigpen. And guess what? The pigs like to stand in it. One slips and lands on you. The smell never leaves. But maybe you think you can rise above it. Maybe you're clever. Maybe you say, "I'll earn their respect. I'll join the warriors." Oh, sweet summer child. To join the Viking warriors, you need to pass the trial of manhood. This involves standing shirtless in the snow, holding a red-hot iron poker, while the local seer chants about Odin's ravens. If you drop the poker before she finishes, you're out. If you hold on, congratulations, your hand is now cooked meat, and infection is coming. Also, your competitors are all named things like Bjorn Bloodaxe, Ragnvald the Skull Grinder, and Sven, son of Sven, son of Sven. These are men who eat raw fish for breakfast and think bathing is for weaklings and Christians. You try to talk strategy. They laugh at your accent. One of them asks if you're from a village where people kiss cows instead of fighting. You nod. It's the safest option. Then there's food. If you thought medieval Europe was bad, the Vikings said, hold my mead. Breakfast is leftover porridge mixed with ale. Lunch is dried fish. Dinner is more dried fish, now slightly moldy. Sometimes there's stew, usually made from whatever they killed that day. You ask what's in it. The cook stares at you for 5 full seconds and says, "Things that were once alive." And don't even think about refusing food. Hospitality is sacred here. Turn down a bowl of sheep lung stew, and suddenly you're accused of insulting their ancestors. Last guy who did that got whipped with a frozen eel. Bathing? Once a week, if you're lucky, and that's only if someone's chopped enough wood to heat the bathhouse. It's a communal affair, meaning you get naked with 8 other grimy warriors and sit in steaming water while they debate which god smells the worst. Spoiler, it's probably you. Still think you can survive? Let's talk weather. It's always winter. Even when it's not. The mud freezes, the roads vanish, and if you leave the longhouse for more than 5 minutes without furs, your nose turns black. Frostbite is a lifestyle. There's a boy in the village named Ivar Nine Fingers. He used to be Ivar 10 Fingers. Don't ask. Then there are the superstitions. You accidentally whistle at night. The old woman next door throws goat bones at your head and calls you a bringer of trolls. You step over a threshold with your left foot. Suddenly everyone's fasting because the gods are angry. A cat crosses your path. Congrats, your next meal might be poisoned. The solution? Smear yourself with fish oil and sleep outside to appease the spirits. At one point, you try to ask the local priest for help. Except he's not a priest, he's a gothy, a kind of spiritual leader who sacrifices goats while tripping on fermented honey. He gives you a charm made of bare teeth and tells you to bury it under your pillow to stop the shadow people. The nightmares get worse. You dream of ravens pecking out your eyes while a chorus of dead Viking warriors calls you. Weak-spleened. You wake up screaming. No one helps. They just grunt, roll over, and mutter something about Loki being hungry. Then there's raiding season. Oh yes. Every able-bodied man, and even some deeply questionable-bodied ones, must prepare for the glorious voyage across the sea to steal, pillage, burn, and if you're lucky, come home not decapitated. You say, maybe I'll stay behind and watch the goats. They say, great! You'll be the decoy if the monks fight back. You try to fake illness. They don't believe you. Fever is normal. Bleeding from the ears? That's just the battle spirit trying to escape. So you're thrown into a ship made of splintering wood, given a rusty axe, and told to row. No shoes. No seat. Just blisters, sea spray, and the rhythmic screaming of your fellow warriors as they chant sagas of conquest. You ask where you're going. Someone says, south. Someone else says, to glory. The guy behind you says, to die probably. By now you haven't slept in 3 days. You smell like rotten milk and bear grease. Your hands are cracked and bleeding. Your back is one giant knot of pain. You're sunburned, windburned, and morale burned. And you haven't even reached England yet. But hey, maybe you'll survive the raid. Maybe. Or maybe you'll sneeze at the wrong moment, get trampled during the beach landing, and spend your final moments staring at a monk's terrified face as your skull is split by someone screaming in Old Norse about honor. So, still think you'd last among the Vikings? Because that was just day 1. Congratulations. You've officially survived the Viking longship journey. Barely. Your body feels like it was beaten with oars, and that's because it was. Rowing on a longship isn't just a physical task. It's a full-body spiritual punishment. Your hands are blistered, your arms feel like wet noodles, and your lower back now speaks its own ancient dialect of pain. You arrive on the coast of what they think is Anglo-Saxon England. Could also be Ireland. Maybe France. Geography wasn't the Vikings' strong suit. Just ask the guy who accidentally discovered Iceland by getting lost in fog. The beach landing is a mess. The moment you step off the boat, your foot sinks knee-deep into cold, black sludge that smells like rotting clams and lost dreams. While you're struggling to free yourself, your comrades are already sprinting toward a village, axes raised, screaming the Norse equivalent of, "Let's Geo!" You try to follow but immediately trip over a rock, hit your head, and lose your helmet. Not that it mattered. Viking helmets didn't have horns anyway. That was just 19th century propaganda. Yours is a bent iron bowl that smells like the previous owner's scalp. The raid begins. You freeze. You thought there'd be a strategy. Maybe a plan. A gentle pre-battle pep talk. Nope. Just screaming, stabbing, setting thatch roofs on fire, and chasing fleeing monks into the woods. You spot a terrified villager. She throws a loaf of bread at your face and slaps you with a bucket. You're concussed and covered in dough. Meanwhile, Bjorn Bloodaxe has taken down 3 armed defenders and is eating raw liver straight from a fresh kill like he's snacking on trail mix. You try to run. Someone throws a javelin. It misses, but you pee a little. Eventually, the dust settles. Smoke rises. The longhouse is on fire. And what have you contributed? A twisted ankle, a mild concussion, and a traumatic memory of seeing a man scream, "For Odin!" while wearing nothing but a fox pelt and a wild smile. Back at the ship, the plunder is sorted. Silver, livestock, barrels of ale, and a captive or 2. You return with nothing. Not even your dignity. Ulfr the Black laughs and says you can still be useful. He needs someone to clean the blood off his axe using only their tongue. You assume he's joking. He is not. You limp back to the settlement days later. The mood is festive. You are broken. You ask if you can rest. They hand you a shovel. It's time to dig a new latrine pit. The last one collapsed. Into the kitchen. You try to refuse. "I'm injured," you say. A child throws a rock at your head and calls you milk blood. That night, the feast begins. The warriors boast, drink, and sing sagas. You sit in a corner nursing a bruised kidney and nibbling on a stale barley biscuit that might actually be a fossil. Someone hands you a horn of mead. You drink. It's sweet, warm, and hits your gut like a Viking punch. You immediately vomit into your tunic. This is met with applause. The next day, the hangover hits. You've never experienced a Norse hangover before. Your eyes won't focus. Your stomach has filed for divorce. Regret pulses in your veins like a drumbeat. Ulfr tells you the best cure is sweating it out, which means hauling firewood up a muddy hill while being insulted by a one-eyed woman with no teeth but an excellent throwing arm. You think, maybe if I prove myself, I can move up, become a smith, or a trader. But here's the catch: Vikings don't trust newcomers. Especially soft ones with weird accents who flinch every time someone drops a spoon. You are an outsider. And in Viking society, outsiders are good for exactly 2 things: dying in raids or being sacrificed to the gods. Which brings us to your next ordeal: rituals. The seer has had a vision. The gods are displeased. They want a blood offering. Everyone looks at you. You panic. You point at the pig. The pig points at you figuratively. The seer decides to roll bones to see who gets picked. She throws the bones. They all land in a perfect line. Everyone gasps. It's you. You try to argue. You say, "I'm not even Norse." She shrugs. Then your soul will get there faster. You're painted in blue woad, tied to a ceremonial post, and left overnight while they chant. You're not actually going to die, but you don't know that. You spend 8 hours thinking you're about to be disemboweled while a blind man sings to Thor. It's unsettling. In the morning, they release you. You collapse into the mud, shivering, covered in goat urine, don't ask, and now officially touched by the gods. You think that'll give you status. It does not. It just means people avoid eye contact and whisper when you walk by. You try to make friends. You help repair nets. You try to learn to carve runes. You even join a fishing trip. You puke over the side of the boat the entire time. A crab gets in your boots. One of the fishermen dies from a jellyfish sting. No one speaks on the way home. That night you dream of Valhalla, but it's just you getting laughed at by hundreds of dead Vikings while trying to lift an axe and dropping it on your foot. Again. You wake up to find that someone has shaved off your eyebrows while you slept. There's a rune carved into your wooden bowl that reads, "Wimp." You're losing hope. Your skin is cracked. Your hair is full of lice. Your soul is full of sorrow. Your nickname is now Blubber Tongue, because you cried when a chicken bit you. And just when you think things can't get worse. It's winter. Real winter. Darkness 20 hours a day. The cold eats your fingernails. The stew is just boiled leather. People disappear into snowbanks and don't come out. You're told to sleep under a bear pelt. The bear pelt moves. It's still partially bare. You try to read the stars. They say, "Run!" But there is no escape. You live here now. And you probably won't for long. Your third Viking month begins with a cough, and not just yours. The entire longhouse is coughing. Deep, wet, echoing hacks that sound like dying animals. Turns out, when you stick 20 unwashed humans and 6 farm animals in a sealed wooden smoke box for the winter, things get festive. You've entered the time of year the Vikings politely refer to as Lung Death Season. The air is thick with wood smoke, goat dander, and regret. No one opens a window because draw a ride on the wind, and if you sneeze too loud, someone might tie a rune stone to your back and throw you in the fjord just to be safe. You try to ask for medicine. They hand you a clump of moss soaked in butter, slap it on your chest, and tell you to sleep facing east. The moss smells like old cheese. You get sicker. Meanwhile, the wolves have returned. Yes, literal wolves. They prowl just outside the settlement, their eyes glowing like eldritch marbles. One night you take a step outside to relieve yourself and lock eyes with a snarling creature the size of a reindeer. You scream. It blinks slowly and walks away, clearly offended by your entire existence. When you tell the others, they laugh. A wolf did not eat you. Bah! Odin has spared you for something worse. Great. You start sleeping with a dull axe under your bed. It's more ceremonial than functional. You've seen toddlers throw sharper objects. But sickness and wolves are just the warm-up act. You're now entering the Viking spiritual gauntlet. It begins when old Eric, the blacksmith, drops dead mid-sentence during dinner. 1 second he's laughing, the next his face slams into a bowl of turnip stew. Nobody panics. They just say, "Ah." The Allfather calls. And they go right back to eating. You, naturally, are traumatized. You point. You yell. You shout. "He's dead!" Someone says, "Yes." He was finished eating. Then the real fun starts, the funeral ritual. Vikings don't do quiet grieving. They do burning boats, blood offerings, and the occasional horse sacrifice. That's right. Someone has to kill Eric's favorite horse so it can travel with him to the afterlife. You're handed the knife. You drop it. You're demoted to drummer, and spend the next 6 hours pounding a sealskin drum while a masked shaman wails into the sky, speaking in tongues and occasionally vomiting onto the fire for emphasis. At the climax, they light the funeral ship. It catches fire so fast you wonder if someone soaked it in pine tar and bad decisions. The heat singes your eyebrows, again, and the smoke carries Eric, and hopefully his ghost, into the next world. But here's the problem. Eric isn't resting. The next night, someone hears footsteps on the roof. Then the goats refuse to enter the barn. Then little Thora says she saw a man with burning eyes in the smoke hole. Suddenly it's panic mode. The seer is summoned. She arrives wearing 12 necklaces and a cloak made of owl feathers. She burns dried cod and mutters for an hour, then declares, "A spirit is angry." Everyone looks at you. You argue. "I didn't do anything." They reply, "Exactly. You didn't do the correct things. You are now on ghost cleansing duty. This involves walking the perimeter of the village at midnight, barefoot, wearing a wreath of garlic and screaming Eric's name while dragging a sack of bones behind you to distract the spirit. One of the bones pokes through and cuts your foot. You bleed. They cheer. Blood offering! It works better now. You collapse in the snow around 3 a.m., hallucinating from pain, cold, and cod fumes. When you wake up, someone has tucked a protection rune under your tongue. You choke on it and nearly die. They cheer again. The next day brings news from the next village, plague. Nothing fancy, just a basic crop rotting, nose blackening, blister-making sickness that sweeps through like a particularly angry fog. You ask what the plan is? Isolation? You suggest. Quarantine? Herbal treatments? They laugh. No, we will spit into a bucket and leave it outside to confuse the spirits. You are starting to realize that Viking medicine is 10% herbs and 90% magical intimidation. When the sickness reaches your own village, people simply deal with it. By dying. Loudly. In corners. The longhouse becomes a chorus of wheezing, groaning, and cursing the gods. You retreat to the roof to sleep among the drying fish. That's when the hallucinations begin. You see a long-bearded man floating above the fjord. He's glowing. You whisper, "Odin?" He turns. It's just Sven, the local man, who's painted himself in whale fat and thinks he's a raven now. You cry a little. By now, you've lost 15 pounds, all hope, and several layers of skin. Your teeth ache. Your ears ring. You don't remember the last time you saw bread that wasn't black and furry. Your fingernails are falling off. Your bunk smells like fermented despair. The only upside? You've developed immunity to nearly everything, except sarcasm, which you receive daily. Blubbertongue fears the wind, someone says. He sneezed on a goat and cursed it, says another. You're now believed to be half-haunted. Not quite evil. Not quite useful. Just sort of, there. But things really spiral when you stumble into the sacred burial mound by accident. You were just trying to find a quiet spot to vomit. Instead, you knock over a ruined stone and land face first in a pile of ancient bones. You've now angered the ancestors. The seer tells you must atone. With a fast. For 3 days. No food. No water. No talking. You last 6 hours before gnawing on a leather shoe. You are punished with public humiliation, strapped to a pole and pelted with dried fish heads while children chant, "Ghost friend! Ghost friend!" over and over. You finally break. You start yelling at the gods. You curse Odin. You shout at the moon. You throw a chicken bone into the fire and declare yourself done with this icy apocalypse of a society. That night, you're dragged into the woods by 3 men in masks. You assume it's the end. But no. They place you in a shallow pit. Cover you in furs. Pour honey on your head. Then walk away. You lie there for hours. Shivering. Crying. Sticky. At dawn, they return. They help you up. One claps your shoulder and says, "You did not die. You are Viking now." You pass out from hypothermia. You wake up in a puddle of melted snow, honey crusted in your eyebrows, and a chicken sitting on your chest. You're alive, but deeply unsure whether that's a blessing or a scheduling error from the gods. Congratulations. You've been accepted, sort of. Your new Viking name is Bone Sleeper. It's not flattering, but it could be worse. There's a guy in the next village known only as Dog Breath the Unworthy. To celebrate your survival, the village throws a feast. There's mead. There's roast boar. There's a drum circle made entirely of orphaned walrus skins. You're handed a drinking horn the size of your forearm and told to chug. You nearly drown. Everyone cheers. You think, just maybe, you've earned their respect. Then Ulfr stands up and announces, "Bone Sleeper will join us on the next sea raid." And your soul quietly leaves your body again. Because yes, you're going back onto that cursed boat. The one that smells like mildew, raw onions, and generational trauma. But this time, it's not just a raid, it's a blood raid. What's a blood raid, you ask? It's like a regular raid, except the goal isn't just treasure or honor. It's revenge. Someone's cousin was insulted by a merchant in Francia. Now you're all rowing across open sea to make a statement. You want to fake sick. But you're already known as the one who cried when the soup bit back. So, no dice. You set sail again. The sea is not kind. The wind howls. Waves slam the ship like angry gods throwing tantrums. Half the crew is vomiting. The other half is singing. You are doing both. Then, mid-voyage, a storm hits. It's not just wind and rain. It's apocalypse deluxe. Thunder cracks the sky in half. The sail snaps like a paper towel. Lightning strikes the water, and the helmsman shouts, "Loki is testing us!" before diving overboard with a battle cry and no explanation. You cling to the mast. You scream. You pray. You vomit one more time for good measure. And then, silence. The next thing you know, you're waking up on a rocky shore, face down in seaweed and covered in barnacles. Most of the crew is missing. The ship is splintered. One guy is arguing with a crab. You've shipwrecked. Somewhere in the northern seas. Uncharted, freezing, and highly unpleasant. But the Vikings? They love it. "We have washed ashore like the bones of Ymer," declares someone with a head wound. You limp through a foggy forest, looking for shelter. Eventually, you find an ancient stone circle. Bad news, it's sacred. Worse news, you stepped in it. The seer with you gasps. The gods demand balance, which is Viking code for someone has to die. A sacrifice is needed to ensure the raid's success, even though half of you are already dead or missing. They draw lots. You panic. You try to hide behind a sheep. The sheep bites you. Your name is called. You fall to your knees, beg for mercy, offer your soul, your shoes, even your last piece of cheese. The gods, however, apparently want drama. Luckily, or unluckily, an old berserker named Einar volunteers in your place. "Let Bone Sleeper live," he says, "so he can learn why dying would have been easier." Einar is sacrificed in your stead. It's loud. It's sticky. You cry. Again. They pat your head and say, "You are stronger now." You are not. You are broken in ways medicine cannot fix. The journey resumes. You sneak bites of moss and cry quietly into your boots. Eventually, you stumble into a village on the coast of Francia. The plan? Pillage. Burn. Leave. It goes poorly. You're spotted immediately. Someone blows a horn. The monks flee, but the soldiers arrive. Real soldiers. With armor. Formations. Discipline. You charge. You scream. You raise your axe. You trip on a cabbage. You're almost trampled. You play dead. A horse sniffs you and walks on. In the end, most of the Vikings escape. You crawl into the longship, dragging what you think is treasure but turns out to be a chamber pot. Still counts. The longship sails back to the homeland, battered and quiet. You've lost teeth. Friends. Hope. A surprisingly expensive boot. But you've gained wisdom? No. Not really. You return to your village as the one who lived through the storm. You're given a wooden charm carved with runes you can't read. They say it means honor. You're pretty sure it says idiot. The feasting resumes. You sit alone, gnawing stale bread. Someone toasts you. Someone else tries to start a drinking contest. You pass out under the table. Your final weeks blur into exhaustion. You help build a new roof. You mend nets. You feed pigs. You accidentally insult someone's grandmother by sneezing during a song. One day, you walk into the forest and scream. And the trees scream back. That's when you realize you've either gone mad or become Norse. You never do figure out which. But hey, you made it. Barely. Scarred, sick, spiritually bent, but technically you survived. Which means you're now ready for your final Viking trial. Winter. Again.